That afternoon, the Philadelphia sky was a pale blue, and weak rays of sunlight fell on the paved streets of Independence Park. A light breeze blew through, carrying with it the yellow leaves that had remained from autumn. The park was quiet, save for a few families strolling, a group of young men playing basketball in the far corner, and joggers letting their hearts go to the rhythm of the city. On an old stone bench near the fountain, a man sat quietly. The faded gray jacket draped over his shoulders looked worn, the stains smeared as evidence of years of wandering without a home. His sneakers were old and mismatched, as if each had come from a different life. His calloused hands were clasped together, and in his palm was a crumpled paper bag carefully folded. No one recognized him. No one realized that the curly-haired man under the hood was Snoop Dogg. A music legend, a cultural icon, a successful businessman. Today, he was not standing on stage, stepping out of a luxury car, without bodyguards or flashbulbs. Today, he was Calvin, a homeless man to passers-by. Snoop Dogg was not here simply to test himself. He was conducting a social experiment, a test of how people treat each other when status no longer existed, when the aura of fame no longer protected them. He wanted to know, would a homeless person really be treated fairly? Would empathy prevail, or would prejudice prevail? If you love engaging, dramatic stories and thrilling cases, don't forget to subscribe to the channel today. Each video is a journey full of surprises, taking you into the world of unsolved mysteries. Join me in exploring, analyzing, and feeling every detail of the story. The park continued its normal rhythm. A little girl giggled as she chased a kite. An old man quietly read a newspaper on a bench. And in the distance, two figures approached. Two police officers on patrol. The younger officer was tall, his hair neatly cropped, his eyes as sharp as a knife as he scanned every corner of the park. The badge on his chest glinted in the sunlight, the name Officer Jake Morales clearly etched. Next to him was an older man, with sunken, tired eyes. Sergeant Ryan Calloway, a veteran officer with nearly 2 decades of experience on the force. Morales walked with a proud confidence. He was the kind of man who believed that justice was in his hands, but didn't realize that sometimes that overconfidence could turn into prejudice. Calloway, on the other hand, looked calmer, but his eyes were always searching, as if weighing every step. As they passed the fountain, Morales' eyes immediately fell on the man in the gray coat on the bench. He looked out of place. Not because he was doing anything wrong, but simply because he didn't fit the picture Morales wanted the park to have. A homeless person sitting around for too long? That was a problem. This park wasn't for that kind of person. "Damn, another homeless guy," Morales muttered, low enough for Calloway to hear. Calloway glanced briefly at the man on the bench, then sighed slowly. "He's probably just resting, Jake." But Morales didn't notice. He'd made up his mind from the first moment. He adjusted his belt, where his baton and radio were, and started walking toward the bench. Calloway hesitated for a second before following, as if wondering if it was worth starting an unnecessary confrontation. Snoop remained in the same position. He didn't raise his head, didn't look nervous. Only his fingers silently squeezed the paper bag in his hand, a small gesture, but meaningful. "Hey," Morales said, his voice not too loud but sharp as a command. Snoop slowly looked up. His eyes were hidden behind the shadow of his hood, but they still had that familiar sharpness. "You can't sit here all day," Morales continued. "This park is no place for bums." Snoop didn't say anything right away. He just slowly opened the paper bag, took out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and began to unwrap it slowly. The action, simple but deliberate, made Morales frown. "I'm having lunch," Snoop said, his voice low and calm without a trace of fear. Morales took a step forward. He didn't like it. A homeless person with such a casual attitude? "I asked you, do you have somewhere else to go?" Morales asked, his voice sharper. "I didn't do anything wrong," Snoop replied, his eyes never leaving his sandwich. Calloway watched from the side, his arms crossed. He said nothing, but a flicker of wariness crossed his face. "Morales, now feeling uneasy, put his hand on his belt, near where his baton was. "I'll ask one last time, do you have ID?" A moment of silence stretched between the three of them. The air between them was thick as a storm about to break out. Passers-by began to notice, a few curious glances directed toward the bench. Snoop looked straight into Morales' eyes, then slowly reached into his pocket. "I have nothing to hide." Morales unconsciously took a half step back, his body tensing, as if preparing to face something bigger than an ID. But Snoop didn't pull out any surprises. He just took out an old wallet, tossing it lightly onto the bench. Morales quickly picked it up, opened it and checked. The name on the ID, Calvin Brooks. He frowned, then quickly pulled out his walkie-talkie, calling the operator. It took less than a minute to get an answer. "There's no Calvin Brooks in the system." Morales stiffened. His suspicion had turned to certainty. Something was wrong here. He didn't know that this game had just begun. Silence fell as the dispatcher answered over Officer Jake Morales' radio. "There are no records matching the name Calvin Brooks." Morales frowned, his eyes darting like knives over the man on the bench. He knew. He had sensed something was wrong the moment he saw the man. Snoop Dogg, or more accurately Calvin Brooks, according to his ID, kept his face impassive. He picked up the old wallet from the bench, stuffing it into the pocket of his frayed jacket, as if it were no big deal. "Looks like your system is broken," Snoop said, his voice calm but full of meaning. That only made Morales more annoyed. He didn't like the way the guy was talking. There was no worry, no fear. It was as if he knew exactly what was going on. "Or maybe you're the problem." Morales gritted his teeth, taking another step forward, closing the distance between them more than ever. Sergeant Ryan Calloway stood back, observing the whole situation with the eyes of a man who had seen it all before. He had seen too many scenes like this. A young officer, too eager to win, trying to prove something without really understanding why. "Jake," Calloway spoke up, his voice low and hard. "He did nothing wrong." But Morales couldn't let this go that easily. "Nothing wrong? A homeless guy with a fake ID loitering in the park? I don't believe that," Morales replied, his voice laced with challenge. Snoop Dogg, still sitting in his seat, only slowly put the paper bag aside. He slowly looked at Morales, as if assessing him. "Who do you think I am?" Snoop asked, not too loudly, but enough for Morales to realize this was no ordinary question. Morales smirked. "I think you have something to hide. Homeless people don't act like this. They don't laugh when they're questioned by the police. They don't stay calm like this." "What do you mean?" Snoop tilted his head. "You mean homeless people are supposed to be shaking and shaking in fear when they're questioned by the police?" Morales paused for a second. That statement, it hit exactly what he was thinking, but didn't dare say. Calloway, standing nearby, watched them both silently. He knew the young officer was going too far, but he also knew, once Morales believed something, it would be hard to change his mind. "Let's see," Morales continued, ignoring Snoop's words. "Maybe we should check what's in your bag." The suggestion sent a cold glint across Snoop's eyes, but instead of reacting immediately, he slowly leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "I don't think you have the right to do that, officer." Morales raised an eyebrow, gripping the baton at his side. "You think I can't check you?" "I know you can't," Snoop replied, his eyes never leaving Morales for a second. That confidence, it drove Morales crazy. He'd seen too many homeless people in his career. They were scared, they were confused, they had no ability to argue with the police. But this guy, he was different. He had a strange confidence. And that made Morales uncomfortable. "Look, Brooks, or whatever you're calling yourself," Morales said, his voice low. "I don't care who you are, but I know something's wrong here, and I swear to God, I'm going to find out." "Sure," Snoop chuckled. "I'd trust you to do your best." That calmness, it was like a slap in the face to Morales' pride. Morales clenched his fists. He wanted to pull this guy up, to drag him away from the park, to teach him a lesson. But Calloway finally spoke, his voice much sharper this time. "Enough, Jake." Morales turned, glaring at his superior. "Sarge, he's clearly hiding something. Then what's the legal reason to search him?" Calloway snapped back, his voice full of authority. "Was he making any threats? Was he armed? Was he just sitting on the bench eating a sandwich?" Morales was silent. He knew Calloway was right. He had no legitimate reason to search the man. Snoop remained seated, a smile flickering across his face. "I guess I can continue to enjoy this bench," he asked, his voice light as air. Calloway sighed, taking a step back. "You didn't break anything." Morales gritted his teeth, anger rising in his chest. He wanted to do something. He wanted to prove he was right. But he couldn't. There was no reason, no proof. And the way this guy was looking at him, as if he had lost a battle he didn't know he was fighting, was driving him crazy. Morales couldn't let this end. He knew, deep down, that the man was hiding something. "We'll meet again," Morales said, his eyes darkening. Snoop just picked up his paper bag, smiling slightly. "I'm sure of it." Morales backed away, but his mind didn't. He wouldn't forget this. As the two cops turned to leave, a knowing smile crossed Snoop Dogg's face. Officer Jake Morales couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He glanced back at the man on the bench, Calvin Brooks, or whatever name he was using. The man was still sitting there, unruffled, untroubled, as if the exchange had never happened. Morales hated it. He hated the way the man was looking at him, not scared, not confused, but appraising, as if the man had seen his every move coming. Sergeant Ryan Calloway walked with a more composed gait, but Morales knew he was thinking too. Though Calloway didn't say anything, Morales could feel the tension in the air. "Do you really think we should leave him alone, Sarge?" Morales asked as they walked across the gravel driveway. Calloway sighed, rubbing his temples. "I think you're making a big deal out of it." "Big deal?" Morales snorted. "He gave out a non-existent ID, Sarge. Doesn't that make you wonder?" Calloway paused, turning to look the younger officer straight in the eye. "Of course I do," he said slowly. "But we don't have enough reason to continue the investigation. There's no evidence of foul play. If you insist on continuing to make this case, it'll backfire, Morales." Morales narrowed his eyes. "Sarge, he's not your average homeless guy." Calloway sighed, then continued walking. "Maybe." Morales said nothing more, but he already had a plan in mind. Meanwhile, on the bench, Snoop Dogg picked up his paper bag, shaking it to check. Inside was half a sandwich he hadn't finished eating. He smiled slightly, his eyes following the two officers as they disappeared from view. He knew Morales would come back. The look, the tone, the way the young officer tried to figure out what was wrong, Snoop Dogg had seen enough. He'd seen too many people like Morales in his life, people who believed they had the right to decide who belonged where, people who believed they knew the world better than anyone else. And that made them dangerous. Snoop stuffed the paper bag back into his pocket, pulled the old phone out of his jacket. He flipped it open, and the number on it made him smile. Over 1 million people were watching live. Comments kept scrolling down the screen. "That young cop is creepy. He looks like he's looking for a reason to arrest Snoop. We see this every day, but this time there are millions of people watching. The cops in America treat homeless people like trash. This is proof." What's next? Snoop Dogg put down his phone and sat back, his eyes shining with excitement. The game had just begun. On the other side of the park, Morales still couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his heart. He pulled out his walkie-talkie and said, "Dispatch, this is Officer Morales. I need an extended check on the name Calvin Brooks. Search any records that might match, even out of town." The line was silent for a few seconds before the operator's voice said, "Confirmed, Officer Morales. We'll search the extensive database. Please wait for a response." Morales turned off the radio, his eyes darkening. He didn't care what Calloway said. He would find out. And if the man was hiding something, he vowed to be the first to expose it. The afternoon in Independence Park passed slowly. The setting sun was starting to tint the cobblestone streets with gold. The footsteps of joggers mixed with the chirping of birds, creating a peaceful scene. But for Officer Jake Morales, there was no peace in his head. He stood next to the patrol car, eyes glued to the radio screen as the other end of the line searched for information. "Dispatch, this is Officer Morales. What's the status of the data check?" The operator's voice rang out, but it wasn't the answer Morales had been hoping for. "There's no data matching the name Calvin Brooks. No criminal record, no permanent residency, no trace in any system." "Damn," Morales muttered, clenching the radio in his hand. "No trace? Impossible. There was no one in America without some trace in the system, especially someone who looked like he'd been out on the streets for a while." He felt like an invisible hand was squeezing his neck. He had known from the beginning that something was wrong with this guy, but now, it was no longer a doubt, it was a fact. Morales turned to look at Sergeant Ryan Calloway, who was leaning against the hood of the car, sipping his coffee. "Oh, nothing," Morales said, trying to stay calm but failing. Calloway just nodded, as if he had expected it. "I told you, Morales. There's no reason to make a big deal out of this." But Morales couldn't let this go. He knew what it meant to be a homeless person, and Calvin Brooks wasn't one of them. He was hiding something. He looked back toward the park. From this distance, he could see the man still sitting on the bench, as if nothing had happened. As if he knew exactly what was going on. As if he was waiting for Morales to return. Morales didn't hesitate. He pushed open the patrol car door and walked quickly toward the bench. Calloway sighed, tossed his coffee cup into the trash, and followed silently. As Morales approached, his shadow fell over the man sitting there. Snoop Dogg raised his head, his eyes sparkling with amusement. "You again, officer?" Morales clenched his fists. "Who are you?" Snoop tilted his head, as if enjoying the moment. "I think we've met. Calvin Brooks, remember?" Morales shook his head. "There's no Calvin Brooks in the system. No trace. So..." He leaned closer. "Who are you, really?" A small smile crossed Snoop's lips. "It's interesting. When I was just a homeless guy, you didn't care who I was. But when I'm not in your system, all of a sudden you feel the need to know." Morales gritted his teeth. "You think you're so smart." "It doesn't take a smart person to know when someone's losing control," Snoop said, his voice soft but more devastating than any challenge. He was toying with Morales, and Morales couldn't take it. "Enough," Morales roared, pulling out his walkie-talkie. "I want to check every surveillance camera in this area. I want to know where he's been, what he's been doing. I'm going to find out who he really is." This time, Calloway couldn't keep quiet. "Jake." Morales turned around, seeing Calloway walking quickly toward him, his eyes full of warning. "We can't do this without a good reason. You're turning this into a manhunt." Morales looked at his superior, his eyes blazing. "So, we're just going to let some nameless, undocumented person sit in this park like that? We don't have any information on him. Nothing." Calloway clenched her jaw. "And what does that mean, Morales, that we have the right to invade his privacy? Is that justice?" "I don't care about justice," Morales said through gritted teeth. "I care about finding out the truth." Snoop Dogg sat still, his eyes watching, like a superior looking down at a piece on his chessboard. And then, to the surprise of both officers, he slowly pulled a small object from his jacket pocket. Not a weapon, not a fake ID, but a phone. "You want the truth," Snoop said, holding up the screen. "Look." Morales' eyes narrowed as he realized it was a live stream. And on the screen, millions of people were watching. Millions of people had witnessed Morales' every word, every action, every tantrum. "You don't know who I am, officer." Snoop tilted his head, his eyes sharp as knives. "Then let me help you out a little." He tapped the screen and the name of the stream was reflected in Morales' horrified eyes. The truth about how police treat homeless people in America. The whole park seemed to fall silent. Morales couldn't breathe. He had been followed from the start. He had fallen into his own trap. Calloway was silent, staring at his phone screen with a mixture of shock and exhaustion. He knew the game was up. But Morales, he still couldn't accept it. He stared at Snoop, who was still sitting there with a knowing smile. "Fuck," Morales muttered, his breath ragged with anger. But Snoop simply picked up his paper bag, stood up from the bench, and lightly dusted off his old jacket. "Thanks for participating in my experiment, officer." He turned and walked away, leaving Morales standing there, exposed to the world. The moment Snoop Dogg stood up and left the bench, the park seemed eerily silent. But online it was completely explosive. Millions of people had seen the encounter between him and Officer Jake Morales, and now they were flooding the comments section with a range of emotions. "This is crazy. Cops trying to kick someone out just because he looks poor? Snoop Dogg just taught that cop a lesson he'll never forget. Get this video out there. The whole country needs to see this." Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, every social media platform was filled with images of Morales, his eyes blazing with rage as he was exposed. Justice for the homeless and Snoop Dogg exposed them quickly climbed to the top of X Twitter trends. Morales stood there, red-faced with anger, with shame, with nothing he could do but watch Snoop Dogg walk away, as if he had never feared this confrontation in the first place. He felt like a clown, a cop being toyed with by a homeless man, who he now knew wasn't homeless, in front of millions of people. "Fuck, fuck, fuck," Morales muttered, clenching his fists. Beside him, Sergeant Ryan Calloway let out a deep sigh. He knew this was getting out of hand, and he knew someone would come to clean up the mess. It didn't take long. In less than 15 minutes, the first media vans were at the park. Reporters from major news stations quickly poured in, cameras raised, microphones ready. We're in Independence Park, where a controversial confrontation between police and a homeless man has just been broadcast live online to millions of viewers. The questions started flying like bullets. "Officer Morales, why did you target a homeless man like that? Is this discrimination? Do you want to apologize?" Morales couldn't speak. He didn't know what to do. He could only stand there, surrounded by cameras, microphones, and suspicious eyes. And then a black Philadelphia Police Department SUV appeared. The door opened and a woman stepped out. Captain Rachel Monroe, the commander of Internal Affairs. Every officer in the district knew Captain Monroe. She was not a person to be swayed. She was not a person to be pressured by public opinion. And most importantly, she never tolerated abuse of power. She stepped forward, her sharp eyes scanning the scene. "Sergeant Calloway, Morales." She nodded to Morales' superior before turning to him. "We need to talk." Morales opened his mouth to say something, but Monroe raised a hand to stop him. "Not here," she said simply, "not in front of the press. Get in the car." Morales stiffened, but he knew he had no choice. In less than an hour, Morales was sitting in Captain Monroe's office. No radio, no gun, just an empty chair and a suspension form placed in front of him. Mrs. Monroe stood before him, arms crossed, eyes filled with disappointment. "Do you know what you did, Officer Morales?" Morales swallowed. "I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Monroe raised an eyebrow. "You think you're doing your job when you repeatedly harass someone who hasn't broken the law? When you turn a pointless confrontation into a public relations disaster?" Morales had no answer. "Do you know how many people have seen that video?" Monroe continued. "Over 20 million views in an hour. City Hall called me. The mayor saw it. And now you're not just my problem. You're the problem of the entire Philadelphia Police Department." Morales clenched his fists. "He's not just any homeless person," he said, almost pleading. He's someone else. I know it." Monroe just smirked. "Do you know someone else?" she asked, sliding the iPad across the table toward him. On the screen, Morales saw the face of the man he'd been dealing with all afternoon. Beneath the photo was a name. Snoop Dogg, hip-hop legend, entrepreneur, cultural icon. Morales' body froze. He stared at the screen, feeling like the world was collapsing around him. Monroe crossed her arms, looking at him with pity. You just tried to harass and threaten one of the most influential people on the planet in front of millions of people? Morales couldn't believe it. You ruined your own career, Morales. She slid the suspension form toward him. Turn in your badge immediately. You are suspended indefinitely, possibly forever. Internal Affairs will be investigating further. Morales had no choice but to shakily remove the badge from his chest and place it on the table. He had lost. And he knew he would never be the same again. The Independence Park incident was more than a confrontation between a police officer and a man disguised as a homeless man. It had become a media firestorm. Overnight, Snoop Dogg's live stream had surpassed 50 million views, with millions of shares across social media platforms. Major news outlets like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC all covered the incident. Late-night talk shows dissected the event, and influential people from activists to Hollywood stars weighed in. On The Daily Show, the host opened with a quip. Imagine you're a cop, thinking you're picking on a homeless guy, only to find out you've just confronted Snoop Dogg in front of millions of people. How stupid can you feel? Laughter rang out across the studio. The Philadelphia Police Department quickly held a press conference to control the damage. In front of a swarm of microphones and cameras, Police Chief David Reynolds stepped up to the podium, his face tense and filled with pressure. The incident in Independence Park was unfortunate. We are conducting an internal investigation and will take appropriate disciplinary action against Officer Morales. When a reporter raised his hand to ask a question, Reynolds tried to keep his cool. Does this incident indicate a systemic problem with how police treat homeless people? The question hit home. Reynolds paused before answering. We have always tried to serve our community with respect and fairness. However, it is clear that we have much more work to do to improve public trust in our police force. But people no longer believe empty promises. They want action. The incident didn't stop in Philadelphia. It spread across the country, even reaching international forums. On television, debates erupted. Are police too easily abusing their power against vulnerable people? What if it wasn't Snoop Dogg but a real homeless person? Who is the legal system protecting and who is being left behind? Some politicians, especially those with a stance on justice reform, were quick to jump in. This isn't just one officer behaving badly. This is a systemic problem, one senator said on. Meanwhile, more conservatives defended the police. Not all cops behave like Morales. A few bad actions don't represent the entire force. But the public no longer accepts that excuse. They saw the truth right on their phone screens. As the country debated the incident, Officer Morales' life officially became hell. After being suspended indefinitely, he became the focus of public criticism. Protesters gathered outside the Philadelphia Police Department, holding signs that read, "Justice for the voiceless. Morales must be fired." Morales' name even went viral online, earning him countless death threats. Memes spread across the internet, making him a national laughingstock. On TikTok, parodies began to appear. A man in a police uniform pretended to approach a homeless person, then immediately ran away when he realized it was Snoop Dogg. Laughter filled the comments section. Morales must have looked the same this morning. The world was laughing at Morales, and he knew his career was over. But what was even more surprising was that the bench Snoop Dogg sat on that day had become an iconic landmark. Philadelphia residents began flocking to the park to take photos with the bench. Some homeless people actually started using it as a place to rest without fear of being evicted.